Hi, this is Chico Resch. You are listening to the Let's Go Devils podcast on the Primetime Radio Network.
Happy Devils Thursday. This is Game Day Live, a special live preview for the Devils take on the Flyers at Wells Fargo Center. I'm your host, Sam Wu, here with special guest Bill Meltzer of HockeyBuzz.com, Flyers Alumni, PhiladelphiaFlyers.com, writing anything Philadelphia Flyers, and also a good friend of the podcast as it's a few hours away, Bill, from puck drop, Devils Flyers, and it's going to be a very interesting season for both clubs, Bill. Devils with their ongoing rebuilding going on around, I don't know, about 10 years right now. But I think right now Rebuild 2.0 is what I call it, with Tom Fitzgerald is going just fine. The Flyers, well, we were talking about this beforehand. The pundits don't really have them doing well this season. But they did hire John Tortorella, so I'm going to start from the top. Sure. John Tortorella. How is he doing, and what's happened so far during preseason? How is he managing the team, and do you think they're really going to be that bad?
Well, let's start from camp in the preseason. They dealt with once again a lot of injuries. That's been a big part of the story in recent years, and certainly not all of the story, but a big part of it has been injuries. Before camp even started, Sean Couturier re-injured his back. And he's still officially week to week. They had some good news that it doesn't look like he's going to need another surgery, but there's still no timetable for him to play. I mean, Couturier is a two-time 30-goal scorer, won a Selke Trophy, was a finalist for a Selke Trophy another year. Flyers can't be without him. That's a player they absolutely need in the lineup in a lot of different situations, so that absolutely hurts. A lot of other key players really didn't get into, like Cam Atkinson didn't get into any preseason games. Ivan Provorov was limited to one preseason game. He's fine. He's in the lineup. So he never really got to look at his team. He got to look at a lot of young players to get some evaluations on them. And he'd be the first to tell you, I have no predictions for this season because I still don't know what we have. Yeah. I kind of think that's where they are. And in terms of what he's been doing messaging-wise, it's been a lot of us against the world. Mm-hmm. But it's deserved until we prove otherwise. And the whole thing is, nobody respects us in the league, but it's our job to earn that respect. And that's been the message.
Goaltending. If you want to compare the Devils and Flyers, you've got Mac Black, Mackenzie Blackwood versus Carter Hart. Yep. It was only 3 years ago we were talking about that. How's Carter Hart doing?
Well, he didn't play in the preseason because he was injured.
Yeah.
And last year was an interesting year for Carter. If you go on PhiladelphiaFlyers.com, I did a really lengthy preview of the game, and one of the sections is on Carter Hart. Last year at the All-Star break, he had a save percentage of .915 and the goals against under .950. Bad record because they had no goal support, but he was fine. At a .915 save percentage with how porous the Flyers were defensively, and compared to, he was actually right about what the league median would be from the Vezina winners to the bottom of the league. And I would argue that because the defense in front of him was so porous, it probably cost them half of a percentage point or even a full percentage point off the save percentage. And when you're getting to 920, 925, you're talking about an upper echelon goalie in most cases. And then after the All-Star break, he was frequently injured and really did not play well. I mean, the team didn't play well, but Carter didn't play well either. So his final numbers ended up looking very mediocre by the end of the year. But until that point, the first little more than half of the season, Hart looked like he did, in his second year, which was a big relief because the year after that was bad for the team, but also Carter didn't play well. So it's hard to say how and where he is, just based off a few practices. Clearly, for him to get off to a strong start is one of the things that's critical for this team. And it's funny you mentioned the conversations around McKenzie and then Carter. because they had a good little rivalry going.
It was kind of like the 1-2 punch for a certain country if you're going to the Olympics.
Yeah.
So I figured there's a lot of similarities
for sure.
between the two teams right now.
Yeah, I mean, the Devils have had a lot of high-end draft picks. Flyers had the 5th overall pick this year, but generally they haven't. They haven't had top picks except for Nolan Patrick, which didn't work out.
Yeah.
For a variety of reasons, including injuries. So the injuries being, again, the number one reason. But, but they're two young teams. The Devils have a lot of team speed. I think they had it over the Flyers in there, but they're still trying to put the pieces together and put individual talents into being, a cohesive team. I think that's the next step. Lindy Ruff, of course, is one of the most experienced coaches in the game. I think if things don't start to come together within the next half a season, I think Lindy's in trouble.
Yeah.
And whereas Torts has just taken over, and I think he's going to be allowed to run with it for a while, even though he is 64 years old. So he's nearing an age where some coaches are thinking of retiring in the next couple of years. But I think when Torts was sidelined, he was on the sidelines for a year, I think he realized how much he still loved to and wanted to coach. And he knows he has a big job ahead of him here. And he's never been afraid of a challenge. So that's really kind of where I think it stands.
All right. Let's talk about special teams. Let's talk about power play. Because I can tell you about the Devils' power play. Bad at times. But what's really been a killer are the shorthanded chances going the other way. Yeah. Anybody else that shorthanded goals, when the opposition are able to score, it is a momentum changer.
Yep.
It just changes everything, the demeanor, and then everything collapses. The Flyers' power play. Tell me a little bit about that, because I feel bad about the Devils' power play, but tell me about what's going on.
Well, I'll make Devils fans feel a little bit better here.
Okay.
Last year, the Flyers were dead last in the NHL, 12.6% power play. The NHL only started officially recording power play stats in 77, 78. So since the NHL officially started recording it, it's the lowest power play percentage in Flyers franchise history. If you take it back to box score research, going back to the beginning of the team in 67, 68, it was the second worst.
Wow.
Only that inaugural team had a lower, and it was like a percentage point or two lower, and only because the Flyers had 2 power play goals in the final game of the season.
Wow.
So,
do they give up shorthanded chances a lot?
Flyers are in the bottom 6 in that.
Bottom 6 too. Okay, so both teams have that problem. That's why both teams were in the top 5. Drafting.
Yeah.
You mentioned Nolan Patrick before. It's very sad what has gone on, the injury, all that. Recently, I know this sounds crazy. When you read Twitter sphere, a lot of Devils fans are talking about Nico Hischier. Oh, no, is he injury prone and all that? I say nonsense.
Yeah.
I think some of the stuff has been just freak accident with the puck. But what are your thoughts on Nico Hischier?
I think Nico has really developed into a fine two-way player. And last year, 21 goals, I think, about 60 points. It's solid. It's solid, especially for a guy who's missed as much time as he has. One thing I say frequently when these things come up is nobody gets to retro draft. And coming into that draft, although there were some dissenters on Patrick, I don't know anybody who didn't have Hischier in their top 2. And he'd become the consensus number 1. You don't get to go back several years later and say, well, maybe you should have drafted somebody else. Whether that be Makar or Heiskanen, that's just the names you often hear with the Flyers. Patterson. You don't get to do that. You only get to draft what's in front of you based on the information you have at the time. And I think he's played fine when he's been healthy. And, to me, when you say somebody's injury prone, I worry more about if it's a specific recurring kind of a thing, like an ACL, and they tears the other ACL. Then you really start to worry.
Yeah.
With Hischier, I do think it's been just mainly fluky kind of stuff.
Fluky, yep.
And he very well could go 4 years without miss a game or two. Now we'll see his status for tonight. Last I heard this morning, he was kind of up in the air.
But it just seems like the Devils sometimes are very strategic with this new. No longer new ownership group, the Harris Blitzer Sports Entertainment. They also own 76ers and all that. It just seems like it's always the storytelling. So, to me, I'm kind of like, he's fine. Yeah. But then again, he may not play tonight. He may play Saturday.
Sure.
Who knows? But I think it's just a matter of day to day, and
Sure.
and he's going to be fine. Also, we talked about John Tortorella. Let's get back to him. I told you my story. You told me about, his story. Tell me how is he a player's coach really, or is he just kind of just has a way about him that, the media and the fans see something different? Tell me a little bit more about, the mind of John Tortorella.
So, Tortorella is absolutely 100% a coach who will push players. And, just as an example, after the one preseason game that the Ivan Provorov pairing with Tony DeAngelo played together, he was asked after the game how they played. He said they stunk. That's as candid as it'll get, right? But he doesn't say anything to the media he didn't already say to the players. And B, he's very clear in his expectations. And the third part of it is it's never, ever personal. And, he'll wipe the slate clean. And if a player proves him wrong and deserves, he'll play him. Not every coach is like that. Not every coach who pushes his players. And he has a very good personal relationship with his players. So it's like, if you have something going on with your family or whatever, he's the first guy to show his support. And that means a ton to the players. The biggest thing I think it means to players is you just know what's expected of you. If there's no surprises, and you don't feel blindsided by things. And so in those respects, most players actually really like playing for him. I know that may come as a surprise to some, just because he can seem harsh and very hard-edged sometimes. But the fact of the matter is most players have enjoyed playing for him, and guys who've gone on to coaching, like Marty St. Louis, for example. The drills that he ran, the beginning of camp in Montreal, they were all taken directly from stuff he did from Tortorella.
Wow, very interesting, because he did win a Stanley Cup with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now the Columbus Blue Jackets, speaking of Columbus Blue Jackets, the Johnny Gaudreau. Remember the whole Johnny Gaudreau? It went everywhere, all right? There was reports of Philadelphia, but Philadelphia didn't have any cap space.
Yeah.
They would have to move mountains just for one player, and it was just simply not going to happen out there. But and then with the New Jersey Devils, Tom Fitzgerald apparently got ghosted.
Yeah.
He goes to the Blue Jackets. What do you think, what happened afterwards when it was already known that Gaudreau was going to be in Columbus? There's still the Tkachuk thing going on, but signing Palat and trading Ty Smith for John Marino, and that would have been that cap space that would have went solely to Gaudreau. Do you think that the Devils, it was a blessing that Gaudreau actually went to Columbus and built the team around Palat and Marino?
It can be for several reasons. One is just that I'm a huge believer that you build through the middle, you round out on the wings, Marino's a nice addition. I think that so in just in that regard, that I think that it fills a need on there, and obviously anybody can use a guy who's posted 100 points. Don't get me wrong, but given the amount of money committed on the cap, and B, given the number of years that are involved, that take him into his late 30s. That deal looks. You swallow it right now. You just work your cap around it. What happens when he's 34, right? 35.
Yeah. And
you still have a few years to go, and now all of a sudden, it doesn't look like such a great contract anymore. I'm leery. I'm leery of contracts that are that long, because there's just so much you can predict, and when it's like I'll use the Flyers' Sean Couturier. Couturier had only missed 2 games over the 4 previous seasons. He played every game, a couple of years, missed a game or 2. He had a rib injury that cost him some time during the COVID-shortened season. But other than that, he didn't miss any games. Now all of a sudden, he signs the contract. This is the year it kicks in. He's injured, back surgery, right?
Yeah.
You can't predict it.
Can't.
And now, now it's an 8-year deal, and this is year 1 of the extension. And now, hope he holds up. I mean, and when you look the way the cap has been flat league-wide, and there's not a lot of equity in the system, and, you look at how many teams, Flyers among them, who are already relying on long-term injured reserve. Flyers were relying on long-term injured reserve for Ryan Ellis. Now, that was a risk going in that hasn't worked out. But in some cases, you can't predict that risk. So if you look at the number of NHL teams that are either already in LTIR or they're in such a precarious position that there's one injury, they're in LTIR because they couldn't add a player who's making even the minimum without juggling things around.
Yeah,
that's about that's much of the league. So when you can try to build internally and get some players who are giving you production on cap-friendly deals, that's really the way you build, and it requires some luck. It requires guys who take that next step. Like you go back a couple of years, for example. I don't think anybody thought Jesper Bratt was going to blossom the way that he did to that extent, right?
And it's the late round picks.
Yeah,
it's the late round picks that you just cannot predict. There's also another one that they picked in the 6th round this past draft, Josh Philman, that he's surprising people in the prospect challenge. But again, it's way too early to predict, and it's hard to predict these things. But that's I've always said that in order to predict what is which organization is on the right track, it's always those late round picks. If you remember back in the early 2000s, late 90s, the 3 possible dynasties was the Colorado Avalanche, the Detroit Red Wings, and the New Jersey Devils.
Yeah.
But I still think it's the Red Wings topped all, not because of the amount of cups, but look at the late round pick. Pavel Datsyuk,
Zetterberg. Swedes, all the various Swedes.
And Ken Holland was able to take all that, and the Detroit Red Wings just went as far as they could.
Yeah.
Now they got one of their own back, Steve Yzerman, who I loved growing up as a kid.
Sure.
And what he did for Tampa, he's bringing to Detroit, and which leads me to this Metropolitan Division is very, very competitive.
Yes.
How do you think it's going to stack? Like, I am anti-Rangers just because I'm a Devils fan.
Oh, so am I. We have that in common.
Yeah, we have that in common. See, we have common ground there, but I just don't think that's the sustainable model to rely on your goaltender like they had with Shesterkin, taking him as far, Kreider scoring 50 goals. But they won opening night.
Right.
But do you think they have what it takes to actually get in the finals? Are they the team to beat with the Metropolitan Division? It's hard to say.
Yeah, and I mean, it's still obviously a very good club. The Rangers had advantages that other teams don't have, having nothing to do with the organization, everything to do with being located where they are in Manhattan. Panarin would only play for the Rangers. Now, he thought about he used the Islanders a little bit to drive up the price, but he wanted to play for the Rangers, and the Rangers weren't a playoff team at that time.
Yeah.
Right?
Same with Adam Fox.
And I was going to say, Adam Fox is the other one.
Yep.
Coming out of college, well, how did they get him? Because he would only play for New York. That's how they got him.
Yep.
Not most teams don't have that advantage. Just their market brings players in, and of course Fox grew up in the area too.
Yeah.
That certainly helps.
Yep.
So you have to convince free agents to come and that kind of thing. So, the Rangers had some benefits there. They did a little bit of a mini rebuild on the fly, and they deserve credit for that. The problem is what happens then is that you hit a plateau, and the guys who've been great on the cap, like Fox, who was on his entry-level deal, well, now he's not anymore. Now he's getting paid like a star.
Yeah.
And now you got to manage around and put the other pieces in, and you hope you don't lock into that's the next phase of a challenge. And I've seen it with so many teams. They get up to the status of being a contender, and they can't go over the top. I'm not going to say the Rangers do until they show that they do it.
Yeah. Yeah, and also you want to talk about the trio. All are back: Letang, Malkin, and Crosby. Do you think they have one more last gasp in the next few years?
Well, every single year I say this is the year the Penguins tumble. They have an old nucleus. They traded so many first-round picks, blah, 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 blah. And they come out that year, and they're near the top of the East. I don't think they're any longer a Cup contender, but they're still certainly a playoff team. So this year I'm going to reverse it and say, yes, they get one more year. They get one more year, and we'll see from there. I mean, I do think Malkin's on the way down.
Yeah.
And Crosby's not going to win the Hart Trophy anymore, but he's still a great player. And Letang just defies time.
Yeah. And I look at the Pittsburgh Penguins because Tom Fitzgerald and Ray Shero came from Pittsburgh. You follow that model down the middle, Nico Hischier, Jack Hughes. We didn't talk too much about Jack Hughes, and you could take your pick of Luke Hughes or Simon Nemitz as that trio. It could be, I don't know what you would say four, but the four amigos, I guess, or whatever. But that team has the Devils have the parts there, but it's what you said. It's just a matter of putting together. With Ryan McGill now on the coaching staff, Sergei Brelin brought up from Utica, I think it's going to bring a different element. But if they can fix some of their things defensively, because their defense, have you seen the size of their defense?
Oh, exactly.
I mean, compared to 10 years ago, it's a completely different defense.
It's such a different game now.
Yeah.
It was, there was once a time where if you're 6 feet or shorter, need not apply. That was the 90s or the early 2000s. Different game. It's a speed and puck movement game now, and not as physical as it was before. So, like Hughes is a prototype that teams look for a defenseman that can move the puck the way that he can. With Jack Hughes, moving up from just for a second, since we hadn't said much about him. I mean, last year he arrived, right?
Yeah.
He just missed too many games, unfortunately, over the course of a year. But well over a point per game. Looked like the guy who was a first overall pick. I think I think he was being more physically ready to play, and it was never a question of skill. So that's one of the real rising stars in the league. But getting back to the blue line, I mean it's all built around mobility.
Yep.
And guys that can move the puck and guys that can contribute up ice too. And the Devils are following that blueprint, and it's been proven to work elsewhere. I can't see why it can't work long term. For the Devils, too.
Yeah, barring any injuries, right?
Injuries.
But, all right, before I let you go, this is what we always do on this podcast on Game Day Live. I can't give it out because I have another podcast right before game time. Predictions. You got any predictions for this game and for the entire season since it's the season opener?
Well, Philly's a team that has to grind out wins. So, it's hard to predict anything high scoring with Philadelphia. If I'm predicting a final score, I'd say 3-2 Devils.
3-2?
3-2, yeah.
3-2? I will say my prediction, but I kind of disagree. I don't know why I have this Tortorella fixation that he's got something up his sleeve. He's a great coach. You talk about grinding. If you want a coach that gets the most out of his players, it's probably him. We don't know how he does it. I think you take all the analytics and you throw it out the window. Tortorella will definitely get it done. Well, Bill, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast and joining us and giving us your expertise. Do you have one last thing, anything to plug, any work that you're doing soon?
Yeah, Joe Watson, the Flyers Hall of Fame defenseman. Joe and I are working on his autobiography. And those who know Joe, he's a very colorful character with a bazillion stories.
Yes.
And B, he was Bobby Orr's roommate as a rookie.
Wow.
He's been in hockey basically continuously for about 55 years. And a mind, like a mind like a trap. I mean, his memory and attention to detail is better than just about anybody I've ever met. So, you always fact check stuff when you work on a book.
Yeah.
And he's almost always right. He remembers things so well. So that's been.
He's got a good memory.
He has an incredible.
He may
memory.
not know how to use a computer, but he's got a great memory. He is a hard drive.
That's right. Joe could remember scores from games 52 years ago.
Yep.
But Joe can't figure out a cell phone or a computer. So.
Yeah, I asked him once. I was like, "Well, give me your cell number." He's like, "What?
Yeah.
What? Do you know who I am?" But that's Joe Watson. Well, thank you, Bill. I'm just going to hit the music now. And I'll talk to you a little bit later. But have a great time at the game, and we'll have you soon.
My pleasure. Love to do it again.
All right.
That is Bill Meltzer, PhiladelphiaFlyers.com, Flyers alumni. We'll see you at Game Day Live at 6 p.m. Eastern. Till next time, let's go Devils.